Greetings, dear listeners. This is Jonah Goldberg, host of the Remnant Podcast, brought to you by the Dispatch and Dispatch Media. Today we have a very special guest. I've been endeavoring for years to prove that I am in fact not Jeffrey Goldberg. Mm-hmm. I do not, in fact, understand why, other than the simple fact that we have the same initials, and that we both like Kurds. People confuse us all the time. In fact, I don't know if I ever told you this, Jeff. We've joked for years about how we get each other's anti-Semitic email, but I once went to go pick up a prescription at my doctor, and they gave me your prescription instead.
Jesus, I don't want to know what they gave you.
I respect the confidentiality of it. So
yeah. It was probably one of a large variety of statins, I'm sure, but whatever it was.
Anyway, so
you got my ayahuasca.
Yes, that must have been
yeah. CBS was like, we don't have an ayahuasca for you. Yeah.
All right. So Jeffrey Goldberg, editor of The Atlantic, longtime fixture of the Washington journalistic scene.
Makes me sound very old.
You're the host of that Washington Week thing where you have that hack.
That's what we call it. That's what we call it. That Washington Week thing. PBS is very informal about it.
Well, soon to be defunded PBS. So
I don't want to get into it. I can't. Too many things.
I think it's Washington Week is one of the great stories of corporations being antithetical to their own interests. I think it's Washington Week. It's either Washington Week or McNeil Era. I think it's Washington Week.
What do you mean?
Ford Corporation wanted to get better PR in Washington and better sway on Capitol Hill, and rather than actually defend their industry against the Naderites and all that, they said no, we'll fund a TV show on PBS, and the rest is history. And it really did wonders for Ford.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's some version of that story. It's in a book called Suicidal Corporation. Anyway,
all right, I'm going to look that up.
Yeah, I'm open to correction on that, but that's my recollection. So where to begin? Again, we are different people. We are.
Yeah, it's been a long, strange journey on the email front. Although it's so delightful when I can literally tell people, I didn't write that. Stop blaming me. For that. And then I once, this happened in public once where somebody says, you wrote, I think it was a National Review, you wrote blank, and how could you say that? And I said, I didn't write it. And they got mad for me denying that I wrote it. And it was just like, this is going to be really unfortunate for you when I explain to you that there's more than one person named Goldberg.
Yeah.
I don't know why people it's like the failure of imagination to not understand that you can have people with the same general name who do completely different things and are different people.
Yeah, well, we do similar things. I mean, we fall into adjacent categories.
Yeah,
but we're different people, for sure.
Like it's like, okay, it's not that so surprising. I mean, it's funny how many people thought it was you and SignalGate.
Yes, that was at first it was really funny, and then it kind of became a pain in the ass.
I can imagine.
All right, but we'll get to the SignalGate stuff. So why don't we start? We're recording this. We should let listeners know we're recording this Tuesday afternoon, June 24th. It sounds like a ceasefire is holding. At least
who really can say?
Who can say? What do you think of the 12-day war, as we're told we're supposed to call it?
It's funny that you mentioned the 12-day war, because I think Trump's reaction this morning, where he was equally angry or more angry at Israel than Iran, which is sort of another through the looking glass kind of moment. I think he was upset because he's a Hollywood producer, and he had just produced the 12-day war,
right?
And people were people were messing up that package that he had just devised. It doesn't matter if Iran just murdered a bunch of Israelis with missiles that they fired to make a final point before a ceasefire. That doesn't matter. What mattered was that it messed up his naming device for the war. He wanted a 12-day war. He wanted to bring an end to the 12-day war, and then everybody was screwing up the production. It was a fascinating thing, right? It's not what you achieve. It's all about the packaging, and it's about the entertainment of the thing rather than the thing itself.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of examples of that kind of thing where, remember, he told the Ukrainians during the first term, just say you're investigating the corruption of the Bidens, we'll do the rest.
Yeah.
He told the Justice Department here, after the election, just say you're investigating corruption and we'll do the rest. He wants the headline, right? He wants to be able to sell the thing. And so he's more concerned about optics stuff than substance, and I think that manifests itself in all sorts of places.
Yeah, that is definitely an understatement. But it goes back to a core observation my colleagues Ashley Parker and Michael Shearer have made is that there's no reality. Mm-hmm. that he doesn't believe in an objective reality. If I say that the war is over, the war's over.
Yeah.
The war might be going on in reality, but in my reality, it's more than a reality distortion field. There's no observable reality. There's only what I say it is. Look, Yemen is a great example. We went to war against the Houthis, and then he just stopped, declared victory. There was no victory. This goes back to the original topic of the so-called SignalGate thing. But there was no victory. But it didn't matter. For whatever reason, he decided that, we won. I mean, there's a kind of genius to it, right?
Right.
I mean, he just declares a victory, and for a lot of people, that's enough. But it's not actually a victory.
Yeah, I mean, because I've thought a lot about this. I think some of this actually stems from Trump's thing with the prosperity gospel, right? Mm-hmm. Which is in all this, that self-actualization thing.
Yeah.
And you can go back to his that deposition where he said his net worth depended on how he felt that day about himself. And there's something very, sort of.
I've tried that with my mortgage company.
It doesn't work very well, no.
But I'm not paying you this month because you have enough money.
Yeah. My feelings don't care about your facts.
Yeah.
So, but all right. So So you wrote a piece in April 2016 called "The Obama Doctrine."
Yeah.
And it occurred to me that I didn't know what the Obama Doctrine was, so I did some Googling. And even Wikipedia has no idea what the Obama Doctrine was. It's a great first sentence. It says, the Obama Doctrine is used to describe one or several principles of the foreign policy of U.S. President Barack Obama. That's it. And then he has a quote from the New York Times saying, you asked about an Obama Doctrine. The doctrine is we will engage, but we preserve all of our capabilities. And that's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what do you, when people ask you, what is the Obama Doctrine, since you wrote a whole piece called The Obama Doctrine, which was deeply reported and had a lot of memory lane stuff I found really interesting when I re-looked at it. What was the Obama Doctrine, and how did we get here, I guess, is the sort of what I'm leading the witness a little bit, but
well, whatever. Right. I mean, Trump is, to me, the greatest advertisement for the true diversity of America is that it produced both Donald Trump and Barack Obama. Both are native-born sons of the same country. It's fascinating, right? The Obama Doctrine, there are a number of ways of answering that now. In the fullness of time, I would say that one aspect of the Obama Doctrine, one thing that made Obama unique in my mind, is that he was the first president who really believed that part of his mission was to protect the world from America's best impulses. And by that, I mean, and, I understand some of it was a natural reaction to Iraq, et cetera. But he really believed that America he didn't believe that America was a malevolent force in the world. He believed that America was a klutz and too quick to throw around its power and too quick to sort of make a mess, bull in the china shop sort of thing. And so he felt like, and this is where he got hung up so badly, both in on the subject of Syria and the subject of Ukraine. He was always looking for a way not to engage in a messy problem. Again, natural inclination, also something that he believed the electorate wanted. But non-engagement and disengagement, has its own consequences. There are consequences to not doing something, just as there are consequences to doing something. And so he was kind of groping for, I think I would say this based on some, sort of direct knowledge. He hated ISIS, as we all do, loathed ISIS, but he really felt a kind of overlay to this, which was that he resented ISIS for dragging America into a war that America shouldn't have been in. In other words, if ISIS had not kidnapped and murdered beheaded four or five Americans, he would have found every reason possible not to get involved in the war against ISIS, not to defeat ISIS. But ISIS gave the United States no choice, gave him no choice. And like I said, it goes back to, he did not see, he had a more sophisticated analysis of the Iraq war than some kind of, dumb left wing, it's Halliburton and George Bush is evil and Islamophobia, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He understood that George W. Bush was motivated and America was motivated by a combination of a fear of WMD, which was not unfounded given that Iraq had WMD.
Right.
So put that aside. He was motivated by the idea that Saddam Hussein is a threat and that if Iraq were just democratic, it would be better and we're an exceptional nation and people should understand that we have something good to offer them. So I think Obama really did understand that as like Bush wasn't bringing his worst impulses. He was bringing his best impulses in a kind of way, but those best impulses expressed kinetically, as they say in the military, could lead to its own consequences. So Obama was really about a kind of a tragic, in his mind, I think you could say that he was kind of he thought he was like a Niebuhrian tragic realist. But the tragic Niebuhrian realism or Niebuhrian influence nihilism can lead to fatal passivity or dangerous passivity. And so we had some of that dangerous passivity. 500,000 people died in Syria because of our lack of engagement. Now, if you're Obama, you would say, who didn't die in Syria? Thousands of American troops. Totally with it. I got it. But again, these are all going back to it's a cliche of the presidency. It's like easy problems don't make their way to the president.
Right.
The easy problems are solved before they get to the president. I have abundant sympathy for any president and the set of unpalatable problems the world is handing him. But there you know what it was? You know what it also was? I remember something in that piece, that 2016 piece, he told me, he said, and this is a quality of Obama where he is, he's in the balcony watching his own presidency as he was president. And so he's analyzing Ukraine and Russia. And he tells me that here's the thing. Russia will always have escalatory interest dominance in the Ukraine matter. It's their backyard. It's their sphere of influence. They're always going to commit more to the issue of Ukraine than we're willing to commit. Now, signaling that to Russia was sort of like, maybe not such a smart thing to do, right? We all get it. Ukraine is a Russian preoccupation, and for America, it was one of a set of unpalatable, annoying issues. But he really he didn't marry theatrical threat and the promise of force to diplomacy. There was always a disconnection between you do this or I'm going to smack you. Trump does not have that problem.
Right.
Trump has a staying power problem. Trump has a transactionalism problem. He has a cynicism problem. He has all kinds of foreign policy problems. But he does not have the he's very Jacksonian, Trump, which is very, very different. It's to be fair to Obama, and Obama has recognized this in his elegantly sardonic way. He said, I'm paraphrasing, but he basically has said in different ways, like, I didn't quite realize how often I would be going around killing people when I first became president, right? I mean, one of the ironies of his reputation is that Obama turned out to be one of the great terrorist hunters in American presidential history.
Right.
He just never he never embraced it in a way, which is, by the way, a popular thing to be. Like, if you want to be a popular American president, go kill a bunch of terrorists who hate Americans. It's not that hard to understand. But for reasons that we all understand, Obama didn't want to sort of like be braggadocious, to borrow a Trumpian kind of word, about such a thing, because that's not the way he was raised, and it's not what you learn at Columbia graduate school and all the rest. Sorry, I'm just like kind of like free associating now.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
Policy.
I mean, so what I'm trying to
I notice how we always we skip over Biden as a subject.
Yeah, I mean,
the Biden doctrine next on the remnant.
What would that be? I have no idea.
I don't know either. I mean, I'm sure we could come up with something.
I think if you're going to do a Biden doctrine, I think the Biden doctrine is, I'm going to prove I was right in all the things Obama said I was wrong about, and that's the Biden doctrine in a nutshell. But
so hard. It's hard. I can't actually figure out if Biden is an asterisk or a footnote. But right now he feels like somewhere between them. It's interesting, right? Because at the beginning of the Biden term, there was a whole bunch of people saying, "Oh man, this is a guy of consequence compared to Obama." Interesting, right?
Yeah, well, that's why the first thing the White House Chief of Staff should have done in the Biden administration is ban historians from the Oval Office, because it was those historians who told Biden, "You can be bigger than Obama. You can have a New Deal," and that
kept him in place long after he should have prepared to leave.
Yeah, it kept him in place, and it made him swing for fences in a way. Like, I think he had an interest in being basically a Democratic Eisenhower, this avuncular America's grandpa who comes out every now and then and tells you kids to stop bickering and then goes back to watching TV. And instead, he was imbued with a lot more ambition than, forget whether we need a New Deal, which I don't think we do. FDR had massive majorities in the House and the Senate that made it possible for him to do things that you cannot do with a 1 or 2 seat majority in the Senate and all that kind of stuff. But what I want to get to is I just wrote my LA Times.
Can we talk about Biden one more second?
Sure, absolutely.
Sorry, no, a question that has not been asked on this show recently. No. I'm just thinking about the tragedy of Joe Biden is that you're really getting to something there, which is that if he had done his presidency right, he'd be remembered by history as a selfless, brilliant bridge president.
Yeah.
Where he could have said in 2022, he could have said, you know what? I'm getting old. I'm getting a little tired. I'm bringing up a whole generation of Democratic politicians who are outstanding. And I'm going to be avuncular Joe. I'm going to give them all guidance. I love Kamala, but I'm not backing her for the nomination. I want these guys to go out, 12 or 15 of them, and go to the American people and figure out which one is the best, and then I want them to run for president, and I'm just going to be here to provide advice and counsel. And people would have been like, whoa.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it would have been great.
That's what he promised, but then, you get the, you get the helicopter and the plane and the White House, and you don't want to leave. Anyway.
And the First Lady starts commissioning versions of Hail to the Chief for the First Lady. And
that was
not great.
In the fullness of time, we'll look at how absurd that whole thing was. Anyway, go on.
What I'm trying to get at is, and I just wrote my LA Times column about this, but for most of our lives, right, up until the Iraq War, the Vietnam syndrome stuff dominated the way people talked about foreign policy.
Yeah.
I pointed out, Johnny Apple was raising the issue of whether or not Afghanistan was a replay of Vietnam and a quagmire 3 weeks after hostilities started.
Right.
The major newspapers in the country ran articles with the words Vietnam and Iraq or Vietnam and Afghanistan more than twice a day on average for the entire year after the start of those wars. And that's all sort of gone now, because it feels to me like we've replaced the Vietnam syndrome with the Iraq syndrome. And the debate, the inside the Beltway debate about Trump's dealings with Iran immediately, and what's particularly interesting to me is that it was the right as much as the left was saying, oh, this is a replay of Iraq, the way a generation earlier they would have said this is a replay of Vietnam. And
it was true, except that the facts didn't match.
Right, except for the facts being different.
It was entirely true emotionally, but there was nothing about this operation was similar to Iraq.
Right. Nothing about...
They're like Jonah Goldberg and Jeffrey Goldberg, Iraq and Iran. They're next to each other. They sound alike, but it's not the same thing.
Right. Well, for starters, there was an open question about the intelligence of WMDs in Iraq. We can have that debate again if we want to. I don't. But no smart, serious observer of Iran disputes that Iran wants a nuclear weapon. Right, you don't enrich the,
or that they have a program,
or that they have a program. Right, I mean, it's clear, it's obvious, right?
IAEA says they're trying to build the weaponization and ballistic missiles and enrichment to a degree way past what you need for a civilian program. Now, of course. Well, by the way, it goes one step further. People were talking about this as the beginning of World War III, and my response to that is, a war that is essentially a counter-proliferation effort by force is the opposite of World War III. World War III, in the kind of the public imagination, being a war that ends in a nuclear exchange. It's like destroying someone's nuclear program before they have a bomb prevents World War III.
Right.
If it works. I mean, and like with the huge caveat that, we, God forbid, but like maybe the Iranians do have a dirty bomb. Maybe they have a secret bomb somewhere. Maybe they can reconstitute their program. I don't think Benjamin Netanyahu, even at the risk of being yelled at by Donald Trump, is going to allow that to happen after all that he's put into this. But put that aside, like there is a possibility that we didn't see something, and that the Iranians have the capacity to be nuclear or are nuclear now. But let's just say that that's not true, and no one really believes that it's true. How does destroying a rogue nation's nuclear program lead to World War III?
Right. Also, World War III assumes that you're going to have a sort of World War I style cascade of alliances where people come in from both sides to join it. No one was going to join Israel except for us, and no one was joining Iran, including Russia,
including its friends
and its friends, right?
Friends.
And so, no, but it occurs to me that when I was thinking, I didn't have Obama really in mind in all this, but when you go back and you read your Obama Doctrine thing, it really feels like a big chunk of Obama's foreign policy was basically within the contours of an Iraq war syndrome kind of thing. It just hung on him in every way. It worked from the assumption that American power was bad when used, and
that we can't defeat weaker states, so we shouldn't try.
Yeah, and I think that and so what is interesting to me going forward is that I think Trump, in many ways, and Biden to a certain extent, although we don't have to really think about Biden too much, like the Iraq syndrome thing is as omnipresent of foreign policy thinking these days as the Vietnam syndrome thing was for 30 or 40 years. And we all know the cliches about generals fighting the last war, and there's a lot of truth to that, obviously.
Oh, the media is fighting the last
But the
war.
media is fighting the last war, too.
Yeah.
I listen to those Sunday shows, and everybody is asking these questions premised on the idea that they're doing lead up to Iraq cosplay. And the fact patterns are just completely different.
No, that's what I mean. It's like who there's no boots on the ground. Look, the amazing thing here so far, at least, I mean, the Iranians didn't even fire at the B-2s.
Mm-hmm.
They flew around the world. They dropped some bombs. They came back. You know, you have people on social media, and admittedly, it's social media. It's overheated, but it's like Trump is going to get young American boys killed again, and it's like, wait, we've moved from a bunch of planes taking off from Missouri, dropping some bombs on a nuclear plant, and coming home, and now we have a draft.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's just it's kind of panicky, and it's like I'm all for. I'm all for turning these things over a million times and trying to understand what the possible downside effects and downstream effects and second order consequences are. But like, just do it based on a fact pattern. Don't do it based on emotion.
So, given what we know right now, and I'm totally with you, things can get worse. They can go sideways 100 different ways, right? But knowing what we know now, do you think the bombing of the nuclear program sites was the right decision?
Yeah, of course. I mean, in the sense that, look, here's the thing, and this is why I don't understand why this isn't communicated. For 46 years, Iran has been at war with America. And again, to go to the sort of the Marxist, just because you're not at war with Iran doesn't mean that Iran isn't at war with you.
Right.
They're responsible for the deaths of up to 1,000 troops in Iraq. They've committed regular acts of terrorism. They've tried to kill American leaders at various points. They have fatwas against people who worked for Donald Trump and who were engaged in the killing of Qasem Soleimani. They've made it very clear. Look, their policy is death to America. So this is what I mean by the Jacksonian. This is like the purest impulse is, and maybe the impulse that keeps you out of long-term trouble is to say, look, everybody should live in peace. We're not an imperialist power. We don't have designs on you. We respect Persian culture. We want to be friends with you. But if you say death to America and you hurt us, we'll take away your ability to hurt.
Right.
We'll take away your ability to make nuclear bombs, period. And if you don't agree to do it voluntarily, we'll just do it by force. We'll fly around the country. We'll fly around the world. We'll bomb your sites and we'll go home. I don't want to, Trump, because of his indiscipline, starts talking about regime change, but there's no regime change operation here. There's just like, we told you don't do this and you continue to do it. So now we're going to stop you from doing it. There's also, for me, a Jewish overlay when your policy is to kill your stated foreign policy goal is to kill 6 million Jews in Israel. It is not that surprising or unjustified if Israel says, you know what, actually, we're going to destroy your ability to kill us.
Right.
Right. I mean, this is not rocket science. I mean, maybe taking out their facilities is rocket science, literally, but thinking these things through clearly is not rocket science. This could go south, and look, I'm perfectly open. This is what I learned in Iraq: is that just because you have good intentions and you think that God is on your side, and you have the capabilities to do kinetically superior actions, doesn't mean that the downstream consequences are predictable, knowable, and containable. But Iran is a truly weaker power. I mean, this is not China. This is not a near peer adversary. And with a president like Donald Trump, I think he will say to the Iranians, look, and by the way, the Iranians responded to this. They fired some rockets at bases in Qatar in a very highly symbolic way. No Americans were hurt. Right now, this feels containable. And at the end of the day, when the dust settles, the literal dust and the rhetorical dust settles, what we're going to have is an Iran that is no longer capable of quickly making a nuclear bomb. That makes the world safer, not less safe.
Yes.
So I mean, I guess my answer is very provisional. It's like, unless something bad happens, this seems like a good idea.
Yeah. I mean, what I think is fascinating about it is that the Obama Doctrine, which I think, I'm only bringing it up because your piece was in front of mine, but basically the general approach of Democrats on foreign policy for a very long time, I think, has been this sort of multilateral idea, this global institution idea that it's better to be wrong in a big group than right alone. And
that's a very good way of putting it.
And I agree with you that Trump's approach to this is sort of Jacksonian. And the irony here is that the Trump doctrine, people are starting to call this the Trump doctrine about not allowed to have nuclear weapons if you're a bad country or a bad actor. And that's understandable, right? That's an argument that you can agree with or disagree with it, but it's clear what it is.
Well, you're not allowed, if your policy is death to America.
Sure.
Then you're literally asking for it. I mean, this is the problem with the whole axis of resistance led by Iran. It's like you talk a big game,
right,
and then you're surprised when there are consequences to your big talk. I mean, I just wrote a piece about Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, making one of the great miscalculations in Middle East history. Right? It's like, here's the thing.
Which is a really impressive thing to do because there's a lot of competition in that category.
I mean, look, he's up there with Nasser in 67 now. Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. And I've talked to, smart Americans who leaders of both parties who understand this. It's like, if you think twice before you invade another country, kidnap their children, murder their old people, rape their women, think twice about it if that country has F-16s.
Yeah.
Like what are you doing? I'm not talking about on a moral level. I'm not talking about like as a practical response to your own feelings of grievance. It's like, is that the wisest course of action? It means that you've profoundly misjudged both the retaliatory capabilities and desire to stay alive of your enemy. And that's the thing. It's like, okay, Iran, the latest iteration of our relationship began in 1979 when you took over our embassy and kidnapped a bunch of American diplomats for more than a year. And it hasn't gotten much better since then. And you keep talking about death to America, death to America. Donald Trump, who doesn't care about diplomacy, doesn't care about niceties, doesn't care about having allies, doesn't care about anything. It's like, screw that. I mean, there's something to be said for the Trump doctrine, which is like, I will smack you if you bother me. Yeah. So don't bother me.
Yeah. Don't tug on Superman's cape.
I mean, yeah. One of the. I mean, there's an ally adversary formula here. It's like, if you're a small ally of a great power, your number one job is not to annoy the great power. If you're a small adversary of a great power, your number one job is don't get smacked.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
I mean, this is just power politics.
But so I want to try an analogy on you. So, this abundance Democrats.
Yes, it was invented in the Atlantic.
Yes, fact. And part of the argument is that that progressives are addicted to proceduralism, right? They call it the procedural fetish or whatever, and they care more about the rules than the results. And it's one of the problems of sort of metastasizing bureaucratic thinking, where you got to check all the boxes internally to get to do things, and the actual thing you're trying to do, like high-speed rail or whatever, falls by the wayside. It seems to me that there's an analog to that in foreign policy, which is there are all these people, you hear them on NPR and elsewhere, talking about the damage. Ben Rhodes has been doing this, the damage Trump has done to the anti-proliferation cause, to these parchment agreements on things. And I think neither of us are well-known fans of Donald Trump, so like it's an awkward position for me to be in. But if your actual point is to stop the spread of nuclear weapons, particularly to bad actors that are run by messianic cults, the international bureaucracy isn't up to the job.
No, of course not.
But B-2 bombers with bunker busting bombs is. And I just think it's very interesting the degree to which you have a whole bunch of people who are more upset by the damage this is doing to their process, to their paperwork approach, than to
it also might be an
cause.
Excuse. It might be an excuse. For some of those people, they just don't want to see Israel come out on top. Others of those people, they just don't want to see Trump come out on top. I mean, you know,
sure.
it's whatever argument you got handy to some degree. But no, it's right. It's like it's what's that joke about? You know, French intellectuals. It doesn't matter if it works in fact, but does it work in theory?
Right.
You know, and it's like you want Look, when people calm down a bit. First of all, what I'm about to say is predicated on the idea that Iran doesn't go nuclear in the next several years, because it can't. Right. But if in several years Iran still has not rebuilt a capacity to go nuclear, you would have to look back and say, well, anti-proliferation by force works better than endless negotiations in Oman and Geneva.
Yeah.
Right. But again, it comes back to like it's so mixed up and febrile, and it's such a part of this. What is America's role in the world? What is Israel's role in the world? Why does America stand with Israel? Why can't we just, if we're just be reasonable with our adversaries, they will in turn be reasonable. And I once had a conversation with President Obama about this, and I was like, you know, anti-Semitism isn't a rational response to your reality. So these people who run Iran are anti-Semites. Totally agreed with that. But he tended to see that it was more instrumental than sincere. Like they're just using this whatever crap to make a point, you know. When I'm like saying, no, this is what they think. Jews are satanic. They belong to the large Satan, the United States. They're going to destroy Islam. Like, pay attention. You know, it's like that's the lesson of 9/11, which is if bin Laden. I mean, I was in Afghanistan. I happened to be in Afghanistan in 1998 when the original fatwa was issued out of Kandahar. You know, the death to the Jews and Crusaders fatwa. And I literally was in Kandahar. I was at a UN facility, and people had gotten hold of this, and we were talking about it, and everybody was laughing about it because it was nonsense, right? Wait, this guy, either who was at that point down the road in Kandahar or in a cave somewhere, was saying that he was going to destroy Christian civilization, meaning the United States and Europe and everything else. And it's like, give me a break. But, you know, I when somebody tells you that they want to kill you, it's probably worth taking seriously.
Yeah,
Just
I mean,
the off chance that they're going to kill you.
It reminds me of a conversation I had with Tom Nichols, your Tom Nichols, about the Soviets, where he said he has some famous quote about this, where they didn't keep a second set of books, by which he meant that, and I'm mangling the quote, but the point was that it turns out that the members of the Politburo actually believed their own bullshit, right? They believed the Soviet propaganda and Marxism and all of that, and they weren't putting on a face in public that was different than what they believed in private. I think it also holds true for people who say, you know, death to the Jews. It's like, if you're willing to say it in public, you probably believe it in private too.
Yeah. It's hard for it's always this failure of imagination. It's hard for an American mind to grasp something that, even if we're not getting involved, is that we don't understand the Byzantine levels of perversity in politics and decision making. The perfect example of this is the fact that Saddam's own generals believe that Iraq's WMD program still existed.
Right.
They believed that it was the general, that they didn't know about it, but they assumed that the general down the road knew about it. Everybody assumed that somebody else was in charge of the program. right? Saddam needed this. I mean, the reason that Saddam needed people to believe that is so that the Iranians would believe it, because he understood correctly that if the Iranians understood that the Iraqis had no more WMD program, Iran would have swept into Iraq, just as it tried in 1988, right? So it's very hard to explain to people who are like kind of like straightforward or whatever, that this is the way people think in autocracies. This is the way people fear-based conspiratorial Byzantine thinking. Anyway, it's hard to fathom it's hard to fathom the layers here, and this is one of the reasons we make mistakes all the time in the Middle East, is because we're not trying to think the way people who are running these particular countries are thinking. It's always a mistake not to like. And by the way, it's a mistake that Iran made about Donald Trump. It's a mistake that Sinwar made about Israel. It's like before you go to war with somebody, know who they are and know what they want, know what they believe, and know what they think, and know what they're going to do.
All right, so that's it's a bit of a forced segue, but it'd be malpractice on my part if we didn't talk about the SignalGate chat stuff. And
segues are overrated.
And but I gotta make it work. We have an internal debate here at the Dispatch when that whole story unfolded about the worst thing about it. And so like Steve Hayes was like, the worst thing about it is that it shows how unserious these people are about, national security and all that. And there were a bunch of different arguments. My argument was, and I didn't disagree with any of the others, but the worst thing about it for me was, if you're an allied leader or a foreign leader, right? But if you're a foreign minister somewhere, there was a chance before that exchange to think that a lot of the sort of J.D. Vance talk was public bluster for domestic consumption, and that behind the scenes they really weren't that hostile to NATO or alliances or Europe or anything like that. And then when you see that that's actually the way they're talking in private, it removes that doubt, right? It removes that strategic ambiguity, for want of a better phrase, about what the internal thinking is at the highest levels of the American foreign policy. And so for me, the SignalGate thing was you cannot rely on the United States as an ally the way you could up until very recently. And I'm wondering, now that you've had time to mull on it and answer 12 billion questions about it, what did you see as the biggest significance of that whole thing?
You're probably right. Their contempt for European allies is quite something to behold, especially when you see that it's really deeply felt.
Yeah.
A deeply felt resentment on the part of the senior leadership of the United States was something. My first reaction to, remember there was a moment when Hegseth dialed it to 11 by putting in on that particular Saturday the attack sequencing plans on Yemen. And I'm looking at it on my phone, and I'm literally yelling at my phone. I was like, dude, you don't have to cosplay Secretary of Defense. You are Secretary of Defense.
Right.
Like, who are you showing off for here?
Yeah.
Like, what, and I called a colleague who I, worked with, one of our guys who covers intelligence. And I was like, what is he doing? Like, why is he's showing off? It's like, I found that very unprofessional and very dangerous. It's like, what, there's obviously the big issue, the undergirding issue is that obviously, people use commercial apps that are out in the wild, because the U.S. government doesn't have a convenient system for high-level secure communications for these people, and they should develop something that people actually can use. But I was just struck by the cosplay aspect of this. I go, Tomahawks are launching at 0900. It's like, all right, we got it. You're cool. And it's like I don't want people who are playing Secretary of Defense as Secretary of Defense. I want quiet, egoless defense nerds who understand the consequences of their actions doing that. That was what that made me nervous, I guess, as a person who lives in America, who's an American citizen.
Well, given the operational security of this Iran, this Midnight Hammer, or whatever it was called, operation, do you find that a little reassuring that seems like they had that pretty well locked up? And it's basically the same people.
It's like, remember that old Chris Rock routine about people who brag that they have a job? It's like, you're supposed to have a job.
Yeah, fair.
It's like his whole thing is like, I take care of my kids. It's like, you're supposed to take care of your kids.
Right.
It's like it's table stakes. Like, oh, good. Pete Hegseth didn't mistakenly leak the. Look, the bigger issue with Iran is that the entire system. I mean, the grown-ups, the people who are in the U.S. Air Force and Global Strike Command and the CIA and everything else, the grown-ups know that Donald Trump is a free isotope, and who knows what he's going to say. He doesn't know the difference between what's secret and what's not, and so they had to do that diversionary flight, just to throw the Iranians off because, the whole stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just. I think we as citizens should expect that our senior most national security officials can make plans and keep secrets. I'm not impressed. I'm impressed by the pilots of those planes who sat in those planes for 37 hours. It seems, I don't know, that seems crazy. I'm impressed by our technological capabilities. I'm impressed by the United States Air Force. I'm obviously really impressed by, the Mossad's penetration of Iranian society and government. I'm impressed by a lot of things around this, but I'm not, I don't know, giving them praise for not for shutting up doesn't seem like, come on, you guys can do this.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, Hegseth wasn't, to be fair, not to Hegseth, but to be fair to the administration, Hegseth was, I think, cut out of the planning here. This was a CIA chairman of the Joint Chiefs and Central Command operation. I'm not sure. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard certainly wasn't involved. I'm not sure how deeply Pete Hegseth was involved. He's in so far over his head. It's ridiculous.
Look, for a weekend Fox News host, I think he's doing a great job.
Exactly.
So, let's as they like to say in Tehran or Qom, let's talk about the Jews.
Actually, it's more, I think in my experience, it's more Ireland than Iran. And Iran, most Iranians are like, Jews are fine.
Yeah.
It's the leadership that's the problem.
So I had your Yair Rosenberg on, and we got into a big
good writer
anti-Semitism conversation. We both came to a point of consensus that anti-Semitism is bad.
There's good people on both sides.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing I want to get at is one of the places where we had a bit of a disagreement, some friction, is, I don't want to do my whole horseshoe theory thing, but I used to reject horseshoe theory, and I now am much more sympathetic to it because now that the right is becoming more illiberal, that's when horseshoe theory makes sense, because illiberalism of one flavor looks like illiberalism of another flavor. And anti-Semitism is one of the classic forms of illiberalism going way, way back. But that doesn't mean that the problems on left and right are symmetrical.
Right.
And so I think Candace Owens is a gargoyle. There are all sorts of people on the right. I cannot, on the new right, as we're supposed to call it, who I think are reprehensible in their traffic of anti-Semitism. But podcast bros and whatnot are different than institutional decision makers at Harvard, at Columbia, at places that have a much greater control.
The publishing industry.
On the commanding heights of the culture. And so even if you want to make the case that the anti-Semitism at Harvard is less virulent than the anti-Semitism of, some podcast guy, the fact that it is in this institution that has much more cultural power and political power means more to me. And I'm not trying to do a scorekeeping thing. I can't stand people on the far left and the far right all the time. I'm not trying to defend. I have no team. I am ideologically grounded and politically homeless. But I'm just wondering how you see and how you explain the rise of these different variants of anti-Semitism on the left and the right these days, and where do you think it's going?
Anti-Semitism is a virus. Viruses attack immune systems. They bypass immune systems, and they manifest in different symptoms in different parts of the body and different organ systems. Anti-Semitism is always there. It's been there since, we got accused of killing God. Mm-hmm. That was a big one.
Yeah.
In rejecting the new Judaism, which became Christianity. And then we got blamed again when we rejected Muhammad and his version of the final word of monotheistic God. And it's just baked into Western civilization, Muslim civilization. It's baked into Marxism. It's obviously baked into fascism. It's just there. It's the ready-made universal scapegoat. And so I'm not surprised that it's overwhelming post-Holocaust immune responses. I'm just surprised it's taken this long. Mm-hmm. So like you're never gonna surprise me by making note of the durability, creativity, and shape-shifting qualities of anti-Semitism. My general, it's not my theory. I don't know who invented this theory, but it's a good one. It's my theory is whatever it is you don't like about society is something that you would blame the Jews for. Mm-hmm. Marxists blame Jews for capitalism. Capitalists blame Marxism. Capitalists blame Jews for Marxism. Nationalists blame Jews for rootless cosmopolitanism, mm-hmm. Et cetera. Communists blame Jews for nationalism. It's there. It's been, what happens is when you develop elaborate theories about the universal scapegoat for 2,000 years and then have a social media environment that can move those ideas, catalog, collate those ideas, move them out. You can become anti-Semitic overnight mm-hmm. just by going on a 4-hour deep dive into the web. It's all there. It's ready-made. And so anti-Semitism is an opportunistic affection, and it manifests in whatever way allows you to be anti-Semitic and still socially acceptable, right? So for people who don't like Jews, well, I like Jews as individuals. I just don't think that it should be a nation. Mm-hmm. I mean, all the theories. I don't have to go through the theories, but I'm just one of the things I'm surprised at is the way so many Jews didn't realize that we were on a pretty brief holiday from history. Mm-hmm. Like, why? Going back to an earlier part of this conversation, why do you think the world is fundamentally different? You really think in the inexorability of progress and reason? Yeah, it's when you've been the universal scapegoat for more than 2,000 years. What do you think is going to happen when people come under pressure and need an explanation for the unhappiness in their lives? Or for the incoherence and complexity of the world around them, right? Anti-Semitism is a kind of like a misfiring, right? It's I'm in a circumstance that I don't like and don't understand. I wonder how I can figure my way out of this. Oh, well, it's these people, who've done it to me. I mean, that's all there is. So it's like anti-Zionism is a socially acceptable or more acceptable version of anti-Semitism in the sense that this is something that I could use to blame the Jews for more broadly for their deleterious effect on human civilization.
Yeah, I agree with that entirely. The only thing I would add is that when you promote arguments that say, I don't mean you, and when people promote arguments that say that disparate impact or disparate performances are proof of the system being rigged in some way, that is going to lend itself to pointing figures at the people who succeed in a system.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things about liberalism that classically understood is that it doesn't see people as members of groups. It sees people as individuals, and that their success is justified based on the merits. When you start counting things as groups, the groups that overperform, they must be because they're benefiting from a rigged system, and the people who underperform are being oppressed by it. And the only other part is,
so wait, you and Ibram Kendi disagree?
Yes,
on issues.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
That's what I'm getting to. Yeah.
I'm trying to get clarity on that. Okay, I got you.
But also, in a time where conspiratorial thinking is popular, and people forget that almost all populist movements become conspiratorial, because the whole idea is that we, the authentic good people, are rising up against these forces of distant oppression and the powers that be. And so their explanations for their plight end up being conspiratorial. Right. And in a conspiratorial age, the most refined, ready-made, off-the-shelf form of conspiracy theory is always going to be anti-Semitism.
Right. That's what I mean by the 2000. It's that 2,000 years to develop into within its own logic, a coherent system to explain why your life stinks. Right. I mean, and if the choice is, maybe I'm having an unhappy life, not because I'm dumb or lazy or whatever, or it's because these Jews are plotting against me. Some people succumb to that, especially in a culture that values victimization, or that raises that ascribes moral value to people special moral qualities to people who are oppressed. I don't, I mean, I've thought about this through the prism of the Holocaust, and it's like, no, the Jews are just regular people who got, I don't feel like we should. I don't feel like we should oppress people further by giving them exalted victim status in a kind of way. Anyway, whatever. It's a longer conversation.
Fair. All right, I promised I'd let you out of here on time, and we're bumping up against time. Just one last quick thing. Where do you think, I said in 2015 and 2016, when the Trump stuff began, this is going to end in tears no matter what. So you might as well just tell the truth and let the chips fall where they may. Many people did not take my advice on this. And I still think it ends in tears. I thought I was proven right on January 6th that it ended in tears. I just didn't think there'd be a second act. So I'm just curious, where do you think the Trump era ends? Like, what do you?
I don't know anymore, because I mean, like you, I spent a lot of time between 2015 and 2024 saying, this isn't good. This is bad. And here's why it's bad. And there are things that people like about him and like about Trumpism. And lately I've been thinking a lot about his gift of luck. Guy just gets one lucky break after another. And if this were a craps table in Vegas, you'd want to be near him.
Yeah.
You want to have some of that luck rub off. I don't know where it ends. If we were not living in both the social media age and in the coming AI age, I might be able to give you an answer based on pre-existing conditions, but right now I don't know. So many people live in unrealities of their own devising, or unrealities that have been built by tech companies to make unreality pleasurable, more pleasurable than reality. I don't know if democracy can survive social media anyway, so I can't tell you where this ends. There is something extraordinary about his ability to try to convince large numbers of people that he's right when he's wrong. I think that another factor, this is the more quotidian, non-civilizational, technological question, but another factor is that the Democrats aren't very good at being a national party that can reach to the center. I think 70% of Americans from the center left to the center right are reasonable, logical people who, when presented with a set of facts, would like to see logical policies put into place so that our lives get better. But I don't think the Democrats right now are interested in that. So we're not going back to something that we used to have, but I don't know where we're going.
So the headline on here from Jeffrey Goldberg is "Buy gold."
Buy gold and beef jerky and 10-gallon water jugs. I don't know. I mean, I'm overwhelmed by the novelty of everything.
Yeah.
I mean, look at Donald Trump's performance on Truth Social the last 24 hours. It's been crazy.
Yeah.
It's I don't mean crazy in like the mental illness sense. It's like, wow.
Yeah.
Like the idea that, when I wrote the Obama Doctrine, to end where we started, when I wrote the Obama Doctrine, Obama was mildly critical of David Cameron and I guess it was Sarkozy at the time, for not spending enough on NATO, right? And this caused 4 days of apocalyptic headlines in London and Paris. Obama criticizes what you have to read it now, and you're like, that's what they got upset about.
Yeah.
We're just in a new thing entirely, and I think when we introduce, not to be apocalyptic, but when we introduce deep fakery and AI influenced election in 2020, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't mean to be a downer or anything.
Oh, it's too late.
Sorry. Mission not accomplished.
Yeah. All right. I told you I'd get you out of here. So Jeffrey Goldberg, thank you so much for doing this, and I hope you'll come back.
Yeah, and give me my mail next time I come back. We do. People, so your listeners should know that regularly get each other's mail.
Yeah.
And I really do think people should study a little bit harder who they're mailing. I really
agree.
do.
I agree.
Okay.
And occasionally
Thanks for having me.
Occasionally people call me Jonah Hill. So like I'm getting out from both ends.
Well, what's funny? Can I tell you a funny thing?
Sure.
Do you have a minute for a funny thing? Yeah. So I know Jeff Goldblum a little bit, the actor, and I once said to Jeff Goldblum, it's really funny, Jeff, because like frequently people will confuse me for you. And he said, you'd imagine this in the Jeff Goldblum voice. He says, funny, nobody ever does the reverse. Nobody ever goes to him, wait, are you the editor of The Atlantic? Or are you Jeff Goldblum from Independence Day? Right? Yeah. During SignalGate, he texted me and said, you know what? People think for the first time, people think that I was on the Signal chat. I was like, I feel like I broke through a barrier in a kind of way in my relationship with Jeff Goldblum. It's like, but anyway, yeah.
I got to say, that would have been a funnier story if he was the one who was included on the Signal.
That would have been amazing if he had been included in SignalGate. Yes. Thanks, Joan.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, so Jeffrey Goldberg has left the studio. I am still here. I should let people know while we were recording, Adam texted me, but I didn't see it until after we stopped recording, that CNN is reporting that early U.S. intelligence assessment says that that Fordo wasn't sufficiently damaged to destroy critical components and only set back the nuke program by a couple of months. Whether that's true, we don't know. I think it's entirely possible that it's true. Maybe even likely that it's true. It's also not entirely unlikely that this is a strategic leak to piss off Trump, or to give Trump an excuse to do it again, or a dozen or other things. All I'm saying is that I think that Jeff and I caveated enough when we said, if all of what it looks like holds true and that this works out the way people are hoping, blah, 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 blah. There were a lot of ifs There's a lot of stuff crammed into those ifs, and something like this was one of those things. So we'll see how all of this goes. I'm doing a thing today. I recorded this episode yesterday, but I'm talking to you today. You're listening to this today, Wednesday. And later this afternoon, I'm doing an event. I'm doing a panel at AEI with run by Matt Continetti, but also with Yuval Levin and Ramesh Ponnuru about William F. Buckley and the 100th anniversary of his birth. I'm pretty sure it will be live streamed. If I'm wrong, I apologize, but you should just go to aei.org and look for it if you're interested. And other than that, I have lots of threads I could have pulled on in my conversation with Jeff, but I'll just address them in the solo podcast later this week or some other time. So with that, thanks for listening, and I will see you next time.
No, you won't. This is a podcast.